G'day everybody, how you going today? It is so good to see you. I do hope you are super well. Today we're here to talk about the brand new stack sensor camera from Nikon. It's called the triple stacked. This is not the new camera from Nikon. The new camera from Nikon is the Z50II. This is the Z50, the ZFC, and the Z30 stacked to look like a sculpture, or more importantly, the Z50II. And I tell you, I'm pretty excited because Nikon have given us so many things that we wanted. We're going to take a first look and why I think it's a great step forward. Can anybody say EXPEED 7? It's a little bit bigger. It's got a little bit more heft to it. It's got a little bit more volume. What's pretty impressive is the Z50, which is a tiny, tiny camera, was still comfortable and still had not a full-sized grip, but a grip which had enough fullness to it to keep most hands happy. With this one, it's a little bit larger, it's a little bit easier to hold on to. Nikon have still managed to keep this camera very small. And again, straight away, I felt that the dials, the switches, and the overall build quality is a big step up from the original. What's happened with the screen? It's a flip sideways. The Z50, it flipped down this way. Unusual, not many cameras in the universe do that, so this is going to make a lot of people happy. For the target audience, I think it makes a lot of sense. Build quality is good. And another thing I love that Nikon are doing here is they're unifying the button clusters. The play button, the menu button, the iMenu button, trash can button, it's all starting to appear in much the same place across the majority of cameras that we have. I suppose this has become even more unified in the EXPEED 7 era. It's hard to believe that this is EXPEED 7 camera number. From an AF perspective, EXPEED 7 is bringing a huge advancement. We have all the subject detection modes: people, eyes, face, head, upper body, dogs, cats, birds, cars, motorcycles, bicycle, trains, and airplanes. I was shooting with this yesterday. Its capacity to pick out heads, people's bodies at a distance, it's not only far improved, but it's very, very fast, so it feels very snappy. I'm currently setting up for another video starring the Z50II, which will be coming soon to this channel, so subscribe and watch out for it. But we're actually currently shooting on the Z50II with the 35mm 1.8S. Due to the APS-C crop, this is allowing us to have natively, with that lens and this camera, a very similar frame to what we get here with the Z6 III and the 50mm 1.2S. Now, in real terms, for conditions like this where you are in complete control of everything, the light and the sound and so on, I believe we can get a very similar outcome. And the difference between them, technically, quality-wise, well, basically there's a negligible difference. And the only thing that people might talk about is the difference in depth of field between an APS-C sensor and a 35mm full-frame sensor. Otherwise, this is very similar. We're also recording this on the Atomos Ninja, so you can see how well the face tracking is going with the EXPEED 7. There's really just no issue at this point in time. The AF works super well. Another thing that's fantastic about using the Z50II instead of the Z6 III here is the tally light. I can absolutely see that we are recording. Product review mode on here with the 85mm 1.8 at 2.2, just so it's a bit clear the changes in depth of field and the changes in focus point. And the fact that this is in front of me, if it's still in the product zone, then it'll keep that in focus. And then if I stray out of the zone, it'll come back to me. And then if I go back into the zone, even so my face is in the background, it won't focus on it because it knows this is closer. And we're basically telling the camera here, yes, we do want you to focus at the thing that's closest, but not anymore. But now we do. Yes, we're getting a JPEG pre-capture, and at this level, I think that's really, really cool. The camera now shoots at 15 and 30 frames per second in electronic shutter, which is super fast, again, for a camera of this level. Basically, I'm being told that this is the same sensor, and indeed the megapixel count is the same. We are at 20.9 megapixels. But I have to say, the fact that we have these advancements in frame rates and also in pre-capture, I do wonder if maybe the pipeline running from the sensor, if the sensor hasn't changed that much, may well be a little bit quicker. The pipeline. And that allows for the delivery of those high frame rates. And I do wonder, like we saw with the ZF, the EXPEED 7 is allowing for better high ISO performance. I think, even so, I'm only able to look at JPEGs because there is no RAW conversion yet. I do think the EXPEED 7 in the Z50II may well be doing the same thing. Look at this image here, shot at 3200 ISO. We are now getting 10-bit video in this camera, and the 4K is sampled from the full sensor, the 5.6K, but also we are getting log, which means you can use all of the really cool and scrumptious new Luts from the Nikon Red collaboration. Super cool for a camera at this sort of price point. Also, what's different to the Z50 Mark I is, of course, recording limits are now up to that 2 hours and 5 minutes. We still have one SD card slot, which is a UHS 2 variety. That's again to be expected at this sort of level in the market. This is the 18-140 APS-C lens. When this camera ships, it will be shipping in kits. I'm not sure how the kits may vary around the world, but Australia, this is the first kit. I believe as time passes, there will be other kits, and at some point in time, you will be able to buy the camera on its own. The two lenses here on my left were purchased as a kit with my original Z50. And they are a 16-50 and a 50-250. They give you an enormous amount of range. Now, obviously this dual lens kit, it does two things that the single lens kit does not do. This is wider. 16mm becomes 24mm field of view equivalent on DX. And obviously the 250mm at the long end takes you out to 375mm field of view equivalent. So it's quite a kit, and I just like how small and light this is. This is a 24-75mm field of view equivalent. Obviously, it does not have the f-stops of this 24-70 f2.8. It also doesn't have the price and the size of that lens, and all of these three lenses are stabilized. And that makes sense to me, and it segues me over to probably one thing that some people will be a little bit disappointed by, and I was to begin with, but then I had a little bit of a think about it, and that is in body image stabilization. Yes, I would like it. I like it in every camera I use, but does someone like me buy this entry-level camera, which is mostly going to be sold with kit lenses? And I think the reality of this camera is, if you're Nikon, you are making this camera for people who just want to buy a pretty affordable camera which will give you a really high level result. But at the end of the day, they're most likely, statistically, to stick with this lens, this 18-140, which is equivalent to a 27 to over 200mm field of view equivalent. And they may never buy another lens, they may never change it. There's also the potential for other APS-C lens kits. Nikon has a few options with some of these other cameras. And again, people that buy them may never buy any further lenses. And I would say that's the majority. And the thing about these kits that Nikon sell is all of the lenses have VR. For the majority of the market that this is aimed at, the problem is solved. It makes sense that there's no IBIS because most people that will use it will never need it because it's in their lens. So I get that. For me, this is just a situation where I have to take off my photographer's hat and I have to put on my reviewer's hat and go, who's it for? Well, it's not for people like me who own more than 10 Z lenses. Now, this camera continues to come with the same sized battery, and for those that don't know it, this is the Z mount. This is the full Z mount, so you can access any lens, and that might include up until something like the stabilized 180 to 600 millimeter lens, which on the long end would end up being 900 millimeters field of view equivalent, because the APS-C crop is built into a camera which has an APS-C cropped sensor. That could be pretty fun, and you've got your 30 frames per second in electronic shutter. You've got bird detection mode, all of Nikon's telephoto lenses. This is the 400mm 4.5, the 400mm TC 2.8. I mean, you can put it on there. You can if you want to, and that is a hell of a combo. It's got the teleconverter in it, the 800 PF, the 600, and so on, the 70 to 200 2.8, and more. All of these lenses, they have vibration reduction built into them. You are still stabilized, so that's pretty cool. Electronic stabilization, of course, that's possible as well. Now, another thing that I love about the Z50, the original one and this one, and this is something you may not know about, it comes with a flash. How cool is that? And what's cool about this is not only is this a little bit of a fill flash for when you might need one, but it's also, strike a pose, it's also can fire other strobes in the room. There's a little bit of a question that I've been pondering about the update. Is or could this be a D500 replacement? Now, of course, we've talked about the fact that this camera will shoot at 15 and at 30 frames per second with the electronic shutter. That is JPEG, not for everybody. It still will suffice many. Let's not forget that this camera does continue to have a mechanical shutter, 11 frames per second. Now, if I remember correctly, my state-of-the-art high-end costs $10,000 in this country D5 would run at something like 12 frames per second with a mechanical shutter. Shooting at 11 frames per second mechanical also includes you getting the full RAW files. That also includes HE star and HE compression. So that is all awesome stuff. That, of course, means that your buffer will be emptied quicker onto your SD card. This is a very compelling combination. Now, of course, a D500, it never had in-body image stabilization, and photographers relied on stabilization within the lens. But of course, a very good point is that if you are shooting action or wildlife, your frame rates are high the majority of the time. Bird in flight, you are having frame rates anywhere between 1/1000th or 1/2000th of a second. In-body image stabilization is not relevant at that point in time. If you are using any of those long lenses from the 70 to 200 all the way up to the most expensive long lenses that Nikon has in the Z range, they are all stabilized. This makes me think that this is pretty close to a D500 replacement for some users. And it's a really affordable option. If you want to go out, and instead of going out with, say, your Z6, Z6II, or Z6III with your 600mm lens or your 180 to 600, and that camera is giving you 24 megapixels, you can go out with your Z50 Mark II with 20.9, let's call it 21 megapixels, and with your 180 to 600 on the long end, you are getting 900 millimeters field of view equivalent. 11 frames per second mechanical in RAW with HE star, and it's stabilized. This is a great result. You've got EXPEED 7, you've got the new autofocus system, which appears to be very snappy, and you do have bird detection. I think there's a lot going on, and for those people that were looking for that sort of camera, this might be worth experimenting with and finding out whether it meets your needs. Some people might ask for more megapixels, but remember, the more megapixels you add, the more likelihood there is of your files getting noisier as your ISOs get higher. And again, for sports and wildlife, bird in flight, etc., you're in the wild. Often in these types of situations, you cannot control the light, so higher ISO performance, lower megapixel count is actually your friend, not the opposite. These things are all worth considering. It's obviously a balancing act when any camera is made. What are we trading off here in order to get something somewhere else there? I do think I can say fairly comfortably that this camera will satiate some previous and current D500 users. To finish off the conversation about the D500 versus the Z50 Mark II, the D500 shoots at 10 frames per second with a mechanical shutter. And this camera, it shoots at 11 frames per second with a mechanical shutter. It's a really interesting proposition. The EVF in the Z50 Mark II is twice as bright as the original Z50. And like many of the other EXPEED 7 cameras, we can now have an exposure up to 900 seconds long. That's the maximum. That's a long exposure. The maximum burst is 200 shots, and the ISO sensitivity is 100 up to 51,200. Like other EXPEED 7 cameras, we have HLG support. Video can go up to 4K 60 with a crop. Without a crop, we have 30p, 25p, and 24p. We can get up to 120 frames per second in full HD. Of course, we're shooting H.265 8-bit and 10-bit, and our tone modes include standard dynamic range, N-Log, and HLG support. This button right here allows you to go to all of the different color profiles. You simply press on the button and then you can scroll through. You press on it and it's done. Again, the idea behind this menu is that you can very quickly choose whatever color profile you want to go with. There's also slots in here where you can download customizable color profiles, which means you can always be constantly changing your look. Now, of course, this can be done through Nikon Cloud, which is also available with this camera. It means you can get more color profiles, and of course, it means you can update your camera through Nikon Cloud. It also means you come home, you plug your camera in so it's charging, and as it's just sitting there, your images are going up to the cloud, into Dropbox or wherever, whichever service that you use. The Z50 Mark II is Nikon Cloud compatible. Let's talk about the ports. Super exciting that we now have a headphone jack, which also doubles as a cable release jack. We have the microphone recording port, and we have, yes, it's USB-C. Finally, all of Nikon's cameras are USB-C. This allows for charging, also allows you to download images, but there's a new feature, new to this camera. It's a first. When plugged into USB-C into your computer, this camera is now considered a webcam, and it requires no software. All the hardware is in the camera to do that. So you don't need Nikon's webcam utility anymore. It is simply a webcam straight out of the box. That's it. And you can also plug it in to your smartphone. HDMI micro port, not my favorite in the universe. For a camera of this size and this price point, it makes sense. It comes in at 520 grams with the battery in it. Well, everybody, I've really enjoyed using the new Z50. The EXPEED 7 brings so much. Better focusing, focus modes have been wildly expanded, 10-bit video with log, the new port, the handling, the ergonomics, the side flip screen, the tally light, Nikon Cloud, and so much more. This is a great option for a vlogger, and as I said earlier, I think there's an argument that it is a D500 replacement for many people who might be looking for that. Perhaps not all. It's a great starter camera or entry-level camera, and it's also a great second or third camera for somebody who owns maybe a Z6, a Z6II, Z6III, Z7, or a Z8. Because of course, it has the Z mount, and all of your Z mount lenses can mount to this camera. If you want to use this as a B camera or a C camera from a video perspective and it's locked off like we are here today, it works absolutely perfectly in that sort of situation, and you are going to get beautiful 4K video out of the Z50II. More importantly than what I think about this new release from Nikon, please do tell me in the comments below, what do you think about the Z50II? It's been so good to see you, and if this is your first time here, I would love to see you again, so please do subscribe, please share, and please like. All right, bye for now.